Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to really go beyond the surface level and dig into insights that can genuinely make a difference. Today, we're diving headfirst into something most of us, get wrong. Negotiation. You probably think it's about winning, right? Yeah. Or maybe losing. Or if you're feeling particularly fair, maybe splitting things, 50-50. And honestly, for years, I thought that way too. But let me tell you, that whole way of thinking, it's not just a bit flawed, it's actually a barrier. It's a mindset that, actively stops you from getting what you really want. And almost always, it ends up damaging relationships along the way. But here's what we're promising today. By the end of this deep dive, you are going to have a practical, really actionable framework. It comes straight from the founders of the Harvard Negotiation Project themselves, and it will absolutely transform how you handle any disagreement, any tough conversation, whether that's, a big deal at work, something tricky at home, or really anywhere else. We know you want knowledge that's quick to get, but also really thorough, really impactful. So that's exactly why we've tailored this deep dive.
We're cutting through all the usual noise, the fluff, to give you clear, powerful takeaways you can actually use today. And look, this isn't just theory we're talking about. It's based on the kind of uniquely practical, tested approaches that I personally love learning from, like the videos from Little Bit Better. Seriously, their stuff is incredibly insightful, so thoroughly researched. They consistently avoid the predictable advice and, they fill in the gaps you find everywhere else, which is why I'm always excited to share this kind of stuff with you. So if you're ready to genuinely master negotiation, really get it, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now for more unique insights like this. And stick around to the end. We'll point you to similar transformative content in the description and on the end screens too.
Yeah, and what's really, I think, the core insight, the thing we need to get out there right away is this: real negotiation. It isn't about compromise in the way we usually think about it. It's not about who wins. It's actually about working together collaboratively to find solutions that satisfy both sides' underlying interests. Just let that sink in for a second. This isn't about settling for half a loaf. It often leads to outcomes where everyone involved gets 100% satisfaction. And crucially, it does this without wrecking the relationship. It sounds almost too good to be true, doesn't it? A bit utopian, maybe. But we're going to dive into some, surprising examples from the source material. Really simple ones, actually. Stories about a library window, a simple cake, even an orange. Cases where the typical fair solutions, they just fall completely flat. But when you dig deeper, understand the interests, you get these truly remarkable results. This is the game-changing perspective, because it flips all the conventional wisdom on its head. And it offers actual practical ways to get outcomes most people just never even consider possible. And like you said, this isn't just some abstract idea. It's a rigorously tested method designed to fill all those practical gaps you find in other advice. So you're not just hearing about it, you're getting genuinely equipped.
All right. And I can almost hear some people listening right now thinking, okay, sounds good, but is this really going to give me steps I can actually use? Or is it just more, high-level theory that sounds nice, but falls apart when my boss is being difficult or I'm arguing with my spouse? And that's totally fair. It's a valid question, and we're definitely going to tackle it head on. I really want to reassure you, this is not just about what you should do, it's about how you can practically implement these ideas right away in your actual life. This deep dive is specifically about mastering negotiation by fundamentally changing your approach, moving from, fighting over positions to understanding shared interests, shifting from subjective demands, I want this, to objective criteria, moving from thinking there's only one pie to creatively inventing new solutions. And maybe the most critical piece, moving from personal conflict to separating the people from the actual problem.
Exactly. And just to give you a sort of roadmap for where we're headed, we'll unpack a really simple but incredibly profound 4-step framework straight from those Harvard Negotiation Project founders. And this is where we really aim to go that extra mile. We're going to tackle the tough what ifs. What happens when the other side just isn't playing fair? Or when they seem to have all the power, all the leverage? We are absolutely not going to shy away from those hard questions. We'll give you tested counter strategies, powerful tools like BATNA, we'll explain that later, and something called negotiation jujitsu, stuff you genuinely won't hear in most places. We want to make sure you feel prepared for any scenario you might run into. This deep dive is designed to give you everything you need on this method. We're leaving no stone unturned, no practical question unanswered, hopefully. The goal is you leave feeling fully equipped, not just, vaguely aware of some concepts.
Okay, so let's really unpack this core idea then. That negotiation isn't what most of us assume. Our journey starts by fundamentally getting its true nature. William Ury and Roger Fisher, the guys who started the Harvard Negotiation Project, wrote that classic book, Getting to Yes. They argue negotiation isn't about splitting things 50-50. It's not just insisting on your way versus my way. And it is absolutely definitely not about winning or losing. In fact, they say, if you're even asking the question, who's winning? Hell, well, you've kind of already lost the plot. That's a really counterintuitive idea, isn't it? Challenges are ingrained competitive streak. That win-lose thinking often leaks into everything, from work meetings to, figuring out who does the dishes. It suggests that if one side feels beaten, any win is probably temporary. And the relationship or future chances to work together, they get damaged. To really get this shift in thinking, let's dive into some examples they use. They're brilliant because they show exactly where our usual thinking goes wrong. Okay, imagine two people, let's call them Sarah and Tom, in a library, arguing. Sarah really wants the window open, needs fresh air.
Tom, though, wants it shut tight, worried the breeze will mess up his research papers scattered everywhere. Now, what's the typical compromise? What would a well-meaning person suggest? Crack it half open, right? A bit of air for Sarah, a bit less draft for Tom. But does that really make either of them happy, truly satisfied? Probably not. Sarah gets, half the air she wanted, and Tom's still kind of worried about his papers. It's that classic 50-50 split that leaves both people feeling maybe even a bit resentful.
And this is exactly where the power of understanding the interest comes in. It's the key difference. So the librarian in this story, instead of just suggesting that halfway compromise, she pauses, she listens, she actually asks why. Why does Sarah want the window open? Why does Tom want it closed? And she finds out Sarah's underlying interest isn't just open window, it's ventilation. Tom's isn't closed window, it's preventing a draft on his papers. So armed with that deeper understanding, what does the librarian do? She goes and opens a window in another room, or maybe a different window in the same room, one where the draft won't hit Tom's desk. What's really amazing here is that both Sarah and Tom ended up happy, fully satisfied. Not because they compromised and both gave something up, but because the librarian understood their real needs, their interests, and found this unexpected solution. Sarah got her fresh air. Tom's papers stayed put. It just shows the power of looking past the positions open, close to the deeper needs. It opened up a 100% satisfactory outcome that just wasn't visible before.
That is such a great illustration, that unexpected mutual gain. And it applies everywhere, doesn't it? Not just libraries. Here's another one we've all probably seen or felt in some way. Two people, one cake. But no matter how carefully one person cuts it, the other one's probably going to think, their piece looks bigger. There's that natural distrust, isn't there? The issue isn't really the cake itself, it's the method of division. And maybe more importantly, the perception of fairness. It's a classic resource fight. So what's the clever fix, the one that tackles both the actual division and that feeling of fairness? You get one person to cut the cake, but the other person gets to choose their piece first. Think about that. If you're the one cutting and you know the other person gets first pick, you're absolutely going to try and cut it as perfectly even as you possibly can, right? To avoid getting stuck with a smaller slice yourself, it's this simple, really elegant method that guarantees an objectively even split. It shows how using a fair, unbiased standard, a fair process, can just completely bypass that distrust. Leads to an outcome both feel good about. It's about setting up a system that encourages fairness, not just hoping people will be fair.
Yeah, connecting that to the bigger idea, it's not just about cake, right? It's about creating a process that's kind of self-enforcing. It takes the ego out of it. It's not, I want more. It's, let's follow the rule we agreed, it guarantees fairness. But maybe the best example, the real light bulb moment, is the story of the orange. Picture two kids fighting over one single orange. The parent steps in, wants to be fair, does the usual thing, takes a knife, cuts it exactly 50-50, gives half to each kid. Seems fair, right? Equal shares, standard procedure. But then, watch what happens. One kid takes their half, peels it, eats the fruit right away, and tosses the peel in the bin. The other kid, though, takes their half, carefully peels it, uses the peel to bake a cake, maybe for zest, and throws the actual fruit away.
Yeah.
Wow, think about that. What a totally missed opportunity. If the parent had just paused just for a second and asked, why do you want the orange? They would have discovered completely different underlying interests. One wanted the inside, the fruit, the other wanted the outside, the peel. In that case, both kids could have gotten 100% of what they actually desired. One gets all the fruit, the other gets all the peel. But instead, because of the simple 50-50 split based on position, I want the orange, they each only got 50% of what was genuinely useful to them. This is the ultimate proof of how focusing on interests, not just positions, unlocks possibilities that standard compromises completely miss. It's a huge lesson in finding value you didn't even know was there.
It really is. And once you truly get that, it changes how you see almost every interaction.
So as you can see from these, simple but powerful stories, The core idea is this. Real negotiation is about finding a solution that leaves both sides feeling genuinely good, not just okay, but happy, and without damaging the relationship. It's collaborative problem solving. It's not a fight to be won. So what does that mean for you? How do you actually find those wise solutions, like the librarian's move or the cake cutting rule, especially when you're in a real-life disagreement? Well, that's exactly what we're here to unpack next, with a really powerful 4-step framework. This is designed to help you become a master negotiator. Okay, let's dive into step 1. Focus on interests, not positions. We just talked about Sarah and Tom and the library window. Remember, that's like the perfect example of this common trap. People get fixated on their demands, their positions, open the window, close the window. They don't look underneath at what they truly need or want, their underlying interests. Sarah's position was open, but her interest was fresh air. Tom's position was closed, but his interest was protecting his papers. If you only argue about the positions, you're just stuck. It's win-lose, or maybe lose-lose.
And this is really where the deeper work starts. The benefits are clear once you see it, but actually doing it, that can be tough. Because positions are usually concrete, right? I want a 10% raise. Interest can be fuzzier, hidden, maybe even emotional. I want to feel valued, or I need to cover rising costs. So how do you actually uncover the interests on the other side? Well, the simplest, most powerful tool is just asking why.
Right.
Why do you want that? But, not like an interrogation, more like genuine curiosity. Ask open-ended questions. Help me understand what problem you're trying to solve with that, or what's most important to you here, or walk me through your thinking on this. These aren't just information gathering. They're showing you actually care about their perspective, their invitations to share. And here's a really vital point about, just human psychology in these talks. People listen better. They're way more open to your ideas if they feel like you understand them. They tend to think, hey, this person gets me, they must be pretty smart and reasonable, and they're more likely to try and understand you back. So if you want them to really hear your interests, start by showing you've heard and you care about theirs. You're not just collecting data, you're building trust, building rapport, even before you state your own case. Little things help here, like active listening techniques, maybe mirroring, just repeating their last few words, or paraphrasing. Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, the main concern is X because of Y. And, it shows you're actually processing what they say, not just waiting to jump in.
That's such a great point. That psychological element is so often missed, isn't it? And of course, while you're working hard to understand their interests, you also need to be really clear about communicating your own. They might not know them, or they might be making totally wrong assumptions. A good way to frame your own interests to make them actionable is to ask yourself this question. Okay, if they agree with me tomorrow, what exactly do I want them to do? What specific thing needs to happen to satisfy my underlying need? This helps you turn, maybe vague desires into concrete outcomes you can actually propose. So, for you listening, how often do you go into a conversation focused only on your opening statement, what you want to say, instead of focusing first on what you need to learn about the other person's real motivations? This first step, it's fundamentally about shifting your whole mindset. From arguing positions to understanding interests, from telling to asking. Okay, so let's say you've done step 1. You've really dug in, you understand everyone's interests. Great, but conflicts are still going to happen, right? It's just life. You want the rent lower? The landlord wants it higher. A contractor wants more money for a change. You think it's way too much. This is where we move to step 2. Use fair standards. Instead of just getting stuck in that endless, tug of war, my price, no, my price, which is basically just a battle of wills. The key is to lift the conversation above that personal battle by bringing in objective criteria.
Right, it's exactly like that cake example again. The problem wasn't just dividing it, it was the distrust. The solution, one cuts, the other chooses, works because it's based on an unbiased, objective standard or principle. It's a rule outside of either person's opinion. So objective criteria are basically unbiased benchmarks. Rules or standards that are independent of anyone's personal whim or desire. They're external, hopefully verifiable things that both sides can look at and ideally agree are fair. Examples, things like market prices, legal requirements, scientific findings, industry benchmarks, professional standards, expert opinions, or even just mutually agreed principles like, reciprocity or equal treatment or tradition. It's about finding some kind of external truth to anchor the discussion.
And this does something really powerful psychologically, doesn't it? People often resist agreeing just because it feels like you are demanding it from them. It feels personal. I want X. Well, I want Y. But if you shift the framing, if you say, okay, let's look at what the regulations say for this situation, or what's the Kelley Blue Book value for this car, or could we consult an independent appraiser? Suddenly it depersonalizes the whole thing. It's not you demanding it anymore. It's the rules, or the market, or the standard practice. This makes it so much easier for someone to agree without feeling like they're backing down or losing to you. They're just aligning with a reality you both hopefully accept. You're arguing for a principle, not against them. Let's make this really practical. Take that home renovation example again. Your contract is vague on foundation depth. The contractor says 2 feet is fine. You've read maybe 5 feet is standard for your soil type. Instead of just arguing 2, 5, and maybe compromising at 3.5, which might be unsafe or cost too much. You use fair standards. You could say calmly, look, we both want this done right, built to last. What do the local building codes actually specify for foundations in this kind of soil? No. Or what do structural engineers typically recommend around here, given the earthquake risk? Where could we look together to find a reliable, independent standard for this so we're both confident we're doing the right thing? See how that turns a potential fight into a shared search for the right answer.
That's the perfect application. And it leads to this crucial piece of advice. Try to figure out some potential fair standards together with the other side before you even get deep into the negotiation itself. Like, if you're negotiating salary for a job, okay, we both want this to be fair. What benchmarks should we look at? Industry salary surveys for this role and experience level in our region, company pay bands, what sources do we both trust? Or selling that used car. You want a high price? I want a low one. Instead of just haggling, let's agree on how we'll determine a fair price. Should we use Blue Book? Check recent sales data for similar cars locally. Get a mechanics assessment. What standards make sense to both of us? By focusing first on how you'll decide what's fair, by agreeing on the standards, you can totally transform the dynamic from a clash of wills to a joint effort to find what's objectively reasonable. So think about a tough conversation you've had recently. Could bringing in an objective standard have changed it? Moved it from a power struggle to shared problem solving? That's the real power here.
Okay, so we figured out what everyone really wants, their interests, and we've got a way to use fair standards when those interests seem to clash, like dividing resources. But what if, even if you divide it fairly, the pie just feels too small? What if slicing it evenly still leaves everyone feeling a bit shortchanged? That's when we need to stop just thinking about how to divide what's already on the table. We need to start creating totally new possibilities. And that brings us right to step 3. Invent options for mutual gain. This is where the magic of the orange story really comes alive. Instead of just splitting it 50-50, where both kids only got half of what they truly valued, they could have found a way for both to get 100% all the fruit for one, all the peel for the other. This just perfectly highlights how important it is to creatively invent options that benefit both sides. It's about expanding the pie before you divide it, finding synergy where you thought there was only scarcity.
Right, so how do you actually do that? How do you come up with these creative solutions, especially when you feel stuck in a rut? The Harvard method suggests a structured brainstorming process. It sounds formal, maybe, but the core idea is super simple. Basically, get together. Could be just with your own side first, or ideally, bring the other side into it too, and just brainstorm. Let all possible solutions fly, no matter how wild or crazy they seem at first. The absolute #1 rule here is no judgment, no criticism, no picking favorites in this first stage. You have to rigidly separate the act of generating ideas from the act of evaluating them. That's critical. Think of it like opening the floodgates. You want quantity first. Get as many possibilities out there as you can, even the silly ones, before you start analyzing feasibility. And there are some practical tips to make brainstorming work better. Maybe keep the group relatively small, like 5 to 10 people. Enough for diverse ideas, but not so many that people don't participate. Change the environment sometimes. A different room, going for a walk, it can spark new thinking. Try to create an informal atmosphere. Make it feel safe to suggest unconventional ideas. And always be clear about the purpose up front. Okay, we're here for 30 minutes to brainstorm any possible way to solve X. Once you have this big, unedited list, then you start sifting. Look at the most promising ideas first, see how you can build on them, combine them, improve them. Don't just shoot things down immediately.
This brings up something really interesting they point out, something kind of counterintuitive, but it's a total game changer. We usually assume that differences between people in a negotiation, that's the problem, right? We go, oh, we want different things, this is going to be hard. But think back to that orange example again. It was precisely because the kids wanted different things. One the fruit, one the peel, that a brilliant mutually beneficial solution was even possible. It's not just that differences aren't always the problem. Often, they're the very key to finding creative solutions.
Exactly. It's almost absurd when you think about it, isn't it? To assume differences are inherently the roadblock. They're often the engine for breakthroughs. A wise solution, a 100% win, was possible with the orange because they wanted different parts. If they'd both wanted only the fruit, that would have been a much tougher zero-sum negotiation, direct competition. So for you listening, this step is really about pushing yourself. Move beyond the first most obvious solution. Don't just accept the apparent limits. Really explore the whole landscape of what could be possible. Turn those apparent roadblocks, those differences, into unexpected pathways for mutual gain. It's about asking not just how do we split this fairly, but is there something else entirely we could do here that we haven't even thought of yet?
All right, let's tackle the fourth step. Step 4. Separate the people from the problem. This one. This is often the hardest, the most emotionally tangled part of any negotiation. Because, we're dealing with people. With emotions, egos, histories. Here's a helpful visual they suggest. Picture a vertical line right down the middle of the person you're negotiating with. On one side, you have the person, their feelings, their perspective, their personality. On the other side, you have the objective problem, the issue you're trying to resolve together. Your goal always should be this mantra: be soft on the person, hard on the problem. That means showing empathy, respect, trying to understand them as a human being, while simultaneously being firm, principled, and clear about the substantive issues.
And it's so easy to get this wrong. It's a very common, often disastrous trap. Sometimes we're soft on the person maybe because we want to be liked or we hate conflict, and then we end up being soft on the problem too. We give away too much, we don't get our needs met, and we walk away feeling resentful. Or the opposite happens. We're rightly hard on the problem, firm on the issues, but we let that hardness spill over onto the person. We become accusatory, dismissive, maybe even aggressive. And what happens then? The relationship gets damaged. Future cooperation becomes difficult, maybe impossible. Neither of those paths leads reliably to wise, lasting agreements. So to really do soft on the person, you have to make it a conscious choice, a deliberate effort. Look for opportunities to offer genuine compliments. Acknowledge their effort. I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this. Even small things matter. And keep asking yourself throughout the negotiation, am I paying enough attention to the people side of this? Am I addressing their potential concerns, their feelings, or am I just pushing my own agenda? It's also really key to understand why these people problems even happen. What are they rooted in? Usually it comes down to 3 things: perception, emotion, and communication. People see the world differently, right? We filter everything through our own experiences, biases, assumptions. So our perceptions of the facts can differ wildly. Emotions flare up easily. Egos get threatened. People feel defensive or attacked, even when maybe that wasn't the intent. Fear, anger, frustration, they cloud judgment. And communication breaks down constantly. People misinterpret words. They fail to express their real intentions clearly. They make assumptions about what the other person means. All these human factors create friction that often has zero to do with the actual substance of the disagreement, but everything to do with just being human.
And crucially, it's not just their people problems you need to manage. This is where real self-awareness comes in. You absolutely have to deal with your own stuff too. Your own anger, your own frustration, your assumptions, your history with this person, your own ego. These can block a good agreement just as effectively as theirs can. Maybe your perceptions are one-sided. Maybe you're not listening properly. Maybe you're not communicating clearly. If you walk into a negotiation already feeling defensive or seeing the other person purely as an adversary, you basically built a wall inside yourself before you even start talking. So knowing your own triggers, your biases, how your mood affects your judgment, that self-awareness is absolutely key to navigating this step effectively. So what's a really powerful, proactive way to stop these people problems from blowing up your negotiation? Or even better, prevent them from starting. That sounds almost too simple, but build a relationship before you need to negotiate. Think about it. Negotiating with someone you already know, even just casually, someone you have some basic rapport with, it's infinitely easier than dealing with a total stranger you see as an opponent. So make a little effort. Arrive a few minutes early to chat about something unrelated. Ask about their weekend, stay a bit afterward, find some common ground, maybe shared interests, or just acknowledge shared challenges. These little moments of informal human connection, talking about sports, the weather, kids, whatever, they build a foundation. You're establishing a baseline of trust and understanding, creating a sort of reservoir of goodwill you can draw on later if or when things get tense.
And this isn't just, feel-good advice. It's actually backed up by research. Multiple studies have shown that simply taking a little time to get to know the other side, even through brief, informal chats, can increase the success rate of negotiations by 25 to 30%. That's a huge return on investment for just a few minutes of genuine human interaction. Connecting this back, this is really emotional intelligence in practice, isn't it? Recognizing that the human element, the people problem, is often the real sticking point. It's the hidden variable that makes or breaks deals. And by proactively building that rapport, you can often diffuse potential conflicts before they even ignite. It's about seeing the person behind the position and understanding that a good outcome often depends as much on the relationship as it does on the logic.
Okay, now, I know what a lot of you are probably thinking right about now. This all sounds great. These 4 steps, interests, standards, options, people, they sound fair, maybe even a bit idealistic. But what happens when the other side just isn't playing ball? What if they use dirty tricks? What if they're clearly way more powerful than I am? Or what if they just attack me personally, making it impossible to separate the person from the problem? These are absolutely valid concerns, incredibly common ones, and this is where our subplot kicks in. We are going to tackle those anticipated problems head on, give you tested counter strategies straight from the Harvard Negotiation Project playbook. So you're not just getting the nice weather plan, you're getting the how to handle a storm toolkit too, for navigating the messy reality of negotiation. Let's start with dealing with dirty tactics, because let's face it, people aren't always straightforward. They might lie or stretch the truth. They might use psychological pressure, guilt trips, threats, ultimatums. They might try all sorts of manipulative tricks. It's incredibly frustrating. And yeah, it happens more than we'd like. Maybe they hit you with a sudden deadline that feels artificial. Or they make an emotional plea designed to throw you off balance. Or that classic good cop, bad cop routine. Or the old, I don't have the authority to agree to that ploy.
The key here, and this is really empowering when you grasp it, is that simply recognizing these tactics often takes away most of their power. It neutralizes them. Once you can see the game being played, you're much less likely to fall for it or get flustered by it. The best strategy: mention the tactic, name it, but do it calmly, factually, not in an accusatory way. You're not attacking them, you're just shining a light on the process they seem to be using, making it transparent. So for instance, if you suspect that good cop, bad cop thing is happening, one person's being aggressive, the other's super reasonable, you could say calmly, you know, Joe, it sort of feels like you and Ted might be doing a bit of a good cop, bad cop routine here. Look, if you two need a moment to align your approach, please just say so we can take a break. You're just putting it on the table, matter-of-factly.
And what's amazing is, just by naming it like that, you put a spotlight on the tactic. It makes it much less effective. Often it kind of embarrasses them a bit, or at least makes them think twice, makes them worry about damaging trust or losing the deal entirely, so they back off. Sometimes just raising a question about their tactic is enough to shut it down. But, and this is really crucial always avoid making it a personal attack. Focus on the problematic behavior or tactic, not their character. So instead of saying, you deliberately sat me facing the sun to make me uncomfortable, which is an accusation about their intent, try something focused on the problem and a solution. You know, the glare from the sun is actually making it quite hard for me to focus right now. Could we maybe shift seats or perhaps meet later when the light's different? I really want to give this our full attention. You state the problem you're having, its effect, and propose a fix, all without escalating the personal conflict. This gives you a way to disarm manipulation without just getting angry or aggressive yourself, which rarely helps reach a good outcome.
Okay, now let's hit that other big fear. What if they are more powerful than you? This comes up all the time, right? You're negotiating with a huge company, a government body, maybe just your boss who holds more cards. If the other side seems to have all the big guns, more money, more lawyers, more authority, maybe just more options than you do, the absolute worst thing you can do is try to turn it into a power contest, a gunfight you're probably going to lose. Instead, the most powerful thing you can do, your ultimate source of leverage in any negotiation, regardless of their apparent strength, is to develop your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Your BATNA. This is your plan B, your walkaway option. This is where your true power lies. Let's make that concrete. Think about walking into a job interview. Scenario 1. You have 0 other prospects and you desperately need this job. How much confidence do you have negotiating salary? Or flexible hours? Probably not much, right? You feel you have to take whatever they offer. Now, scenario 2. You walk into that exact same interview, but this time you have 2 other really good job offers sitting on the table. Solid offers. The difference in how you feel, how you carry yourself, and your actual ability to negotiate is massive, isn't it? The easier it is for you to walk away from this particular negotiation because you have a strong, attractive alternative, the more power you actually have in that negotiation. Your BATNA gives you the confidence to say no to a bad deal. It protects you from accepting terms that are below your minimum threshold just because you feel cornered.
This is so critical. And it's amazing how often people neglect it. Developing your BATNA doesn't just tell you what your bottom line is. You know, that point where you're better off walking away than accepting their offer. It almost always raises that bottom line for you. Because knowing you have a decent alternative makes you less desperate, less willing to settle for crumbs. And here is the single most important piece of practical advice on this. Always figure out your BAT&A before you start negotiating. Don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, let's just talk first, see what they offer, and then I'll figure out my backup plan if it doesn't work out. That's backwards. If you don't have a clear, well-researched BAT&A before you walk in that room, you are negotiating blind. You have no anchor. You're much more likely to agree to something that isn't really in your best interest, simply because you haven't defined what better than this actually looks like. Your leverage isn't just about what you want from them, it's about what you are prepared and able to do without them. That knowledge empowers you enormously even when you feel like the underdog. It means you always have a choice, and that choice is your strength. Yeah. Okay, last scenario in this tough stuff section. What if they just attack you personally? This is incredibly frustrating, right? And it's probably the fastest way for a negotiation to just completely fall apart in a useless conflict. When they stop talking about the issues, the problem, and they start attacking you, criticizing your ideas unfairly, questioning your motives, maybe even insulting your character, it gets really tough. Your natural reaction, your gut instinct, is to defend yourself, isn't it? To push back, maybe attack them in return. But that usually just leads down a rabbit hole. You push, they push back harder, and suddenly you're locked in this pointless cycle of attacks and counterattacks. The real goal, finding a fair solution to the actual problem, gets completely lost. It becomes a battle of egos, not issues.
So the big question is, what do you do then? How do you break that cycle when they bring personal attacks into it? The technique the Harvard folks recommend here is called negotiation jujitsu. Just like in martial arts, where you don't meet force directly with force, but instead you use your opponent's momentum, redirect their energy, negotiation jujitsu is about sidestepping their attacks instead of blocking them head on. You refuse to engage on their terms, personal attacks, and instead redirect their energy back towards solving the actual problem. There are three main techniques within this approach. First, look behind their position, especially when it comes wrapped in an attack. When they say something aggressive or dismissive about you or your proposal, don't just react defensively. Don't say yes or no to their demand. Instead, get curious. Ask why. What underlying interest or concern might be fueling this attack? So if they say, your proposal is totally unrealistic, it shows you have no clue about our business. Instead of arguing, yes, it is realistic, try responding with something like, help me understand specifically what parts of this proposal seem unrealistic from your perspective. What particular business needs does it seem to miss? See how that redirects. From their attack on you, back to the substance, back to their underlying concerns, you're inviting them to explain the problem, not just vent their frustration at you. Second technique. If they just keep shooting down every single idea you put forward, rejecting everything without offering any constructive alternatives themselves, ask for their advice. Turn the tables. You could say something like, okay, it sounds like none of my suggestions so far are really hitting the mark for you. I genuinely want to find something that works for both of us. If you were in my shoes, facing my constraints and objectives, what would you suggest? How would you approach solving this? This does a couple of things. It forces them to step into your perspective, even momentarily. It encourages them to start thinking about solutions, not just roadblocks. It subtly shifts some of the burden for finding a workable path onto them, often making them more constructive. And the third technique, invite criticism. This sounds counterintuitive, maybe even weak, but it's incredibly powerful. When they attack your idea, instead of jumping to defend it, lean into it. Ask them directly, okay, tell me more. What exactly is wrong with this approach in your view? Or what are the specific flaws you see here? Or what would need to change about this idea to make it more acceptable or workable for you? This is not about admitting defeat, it's a strategic information gathering move. It helps you learn about their underlying interests, their hidden objections, maybe things they haven't even articulated clearly yet. You get valuable data to either refine your proposal or understand the real root of their resistance, all without getting drawn into a defensive argument. It shifts you from being a reactive defender to being a strategic inquirer. You're using their negative energy, their criticism, to actually pull them closer towards a collaborative solution.
Wow. So we have covered a huge amount of really valuable ground today, haven't we? We've unpacked that whole 4-step framework for mastering negotiation. Focusing on interests, not positions, using fair standards, inventing options for mutual gain, and separating the people from the problem. Crucial stuff. And then we tackled the tough parts too, armed you with those counter strategies for when things get difficult. Dealing with dirty tactics by naming them, handling power imbalances by knowing your baltane, and sidestepping personal attacks using negotiation jujitsu. This deep dive really has, I hope, given you a unique, tested, and genuinely practical roadmap for success in pretty much any negotiation you might face, turning potential fights into chances for collaboration and hopefully stronger relationships too.
And I'd love to wrap up with a quick story. It's a fantastic one that, for me, it just perfectly captures the real meaning of negotiation, because we so often get hung up on who won or lost. It's from back in 1964 in Hyde Park, London. There's an American father playing frisbee with his young son. Now, back then, hardly anyone in England had seen a frisbee before, so naturally, a small crowd gathered, just watching, fascinated by this weird flying disc game. After watching for about 15 minutes, a very proper English gentleman approaches the father, looking quite puzzled, and asks quite earnestly, "Excuse me, sir, I've been observing for some time. Could you tell me who's winning?" Connecting that back, asking who's winning in a negotiation. It's fundamentally like asking who's winning in a good marriage, or maybe even just playing catch with your kid. It completely misses the entire point, doesn't it? If your main focus is on winning, you've misunderstood the whole purpose of the interaction. The real goal, the true essence of effective negotiation, is about working together. It's about collaborating to find a solution that satisfies both sides' important underlying interests. This is about creating more value, expanding the pie, and strengthening the relationship while you do it. This isn't just, a nice technique. It's a fundamental paradigm shift. One that can help you solve problems and navigate dilemmas much more effectively in pretty much every part of your life. From small daily things to huge, complex challenges.
Absolutely. And armed with all these powerful, practical insights from today, you really do have everything you need to start putting these strategies into practice. Right now. Don't just let this be interesting information. Take action. Start small, maybe. In your very next conversation that feels a bit challenging, maybe with a colleague, a family member, a service provider, consciously try to identify the underlying interests. Ask why. Listen more deeply. Or maybe next time you feel stuck on a simple split the difference solution, pause and brainstorm. Could there be a more creative option that gives everyone more of what they really want? The power truly comes from applying it. And if you found this deep dive useful, if you want more practical, unique content like this that really helps you understand complex topics and gives you skills you can actually use, please make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. Your support genuinely helps us keep creating these in-depth explorations. You can also find similar insightful deep dives and other transformative content by checking out the end screens that should be popping up, or by clicking the link to our channel down in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.